The alien hospital was always busy, filled with cries, strange machines, and the smell of burned metal from the battlefield outside. Nurse Lyra moved quickly between rooms, her hands trembling slightly as she checked on patients. But her heart stopped when the doors opened with a heavy slam. 2 alien soldiers dragged in a human, his uniform torn, his chest bleeding, his face pale but his eyes still open. Lyra had seen many humans during the war, most of them screaming, fighting, or cursing even when they were half dead. But this one was different. He did not shout, he did not beg. He only gave a faint smile as if pain was nothing to him. "Put him here," Lyra said, her voice shaking. The soldiers obeyed, laying him on the bed, his blood soaking into the sheets. His breathing was rough, heavy like he was dragging every breath through fire. Lyra looked at his wounds and felt fear rise in her chest. No one should have survived wounds like this, not an alien, not a human, not anyone. She had seen warriors with half the damage die in minutes. Yet this man's eyes still searched the room, sharp and alive. "What is your name?" she whispered, trying to keep him conscious. The human coughed, blood on his lips, but still managed to whisper back, "Daniel." Just a name, simple and human. But it struck her like a weapon, because he said it with strength, not weakness. Lyra tried to clean the blood, her hands shaking as she pressed bandages against his chest. Every time she touched him, she felt the strength in his body, muscles refusing to give up even when torn apart. It was not natural. It was not something she had ever seen in her years as a nurse. The other staff looked at Daniel with doubt. Some even muttered that he would not last the night. But Lyra could not look away. She felt something in him, something unbroken. She trembled because she realized this human was not like the others. He was different. He was dangerous in a way she could not understand. "Don't waste your supplies on me," Daniel whispered suddenly, his voice weak but steady. Lyra froze, staring down at him. "What do you mean?" she asked. His eyes met hers, calm, even kind. "Save them for the others." "I'll manage." Her heart skipped. No alien, no warrior had ever said such words in her care. They all begged for more medicine, more treatment, more life. But this human, broken and bleeding, was telling her to use her strength for someone else. The nurse felt her hands tremble harder, not from fear, but from something deeper. Why would he choose others before himself? Why would he refuse comfort when his body screamed for it? As she worked on him, she heard whispers in the hallway. "Humans are reckless," one doctor said. "They don't know when to die." "They're stubborn beasts," another muttered. "They'll burn through our supplies for nothing." But Lyra shook her head, because what she saw in Daniel was not recklessness. It was willpower, something sharp and dangerous, something that refused to be broken. Even when his heart nearly stopped, his eyes still searched hers, steady and unafraid. The night grew darker. Machines hummed, and Lyra sat by his bed long after her shift should have ended. She told herself it was duty, that she had to monitor him. But inside she knew the truth. She could not leave because she had never seen a human like this before. Her people had told her humans were wild, unpredictable, always violent. But Daniel was calm, gentle even in his agony, and that shook her more than any battlefield scream. She trembled every time he breathed, afraid he might stop, yet also afraid of what might happen if he lived. Hours passed, and Daniel drifted in and out of sleep, whispering strange words in his fever, names she did not know, voices from his past, maybe family, maybe comrades. Each time his lips moved, his hand clenched, as if holding on to someone who was not there. Lyra leaned closer, listening, her heart beating faster. He was not fighting for himself, she realized. He was fighting for them, for the people in his memories. That truth made her chest tighten, because she knew no alien soldier fought like that by morning. When the first light touched the hospital windows, Daniel was still alive. The doctors were shocked, whispering that it was impossible. But Lyra knew the truth. This human was not surviving by chance, he was surviving by choice. And as she looked at him, pale but breathing, his faint smile still there, she trembled again, not because of fear, but because she realized something terrifying. She had never seen a human react like this before. And deep in her heart, she knew the galaxy had not either. The night was heavy in the alien hospital, the silence broken only by the beeping of monitors and the soft footsteps of nurses. Lyra stayed close to Daniel's bed. Even though her shift was over hours ago, something inside her refused to leave. Daniel's breathing was shallow, his chest rising and falling with effort, yet his eyes still open now and then, still sharp, still alive. Every other patient begged for stronger painkillers, for more medicine. But when Lyra tried to give him the injection, Daniel shook his head slowly. No, he whispered, his voice rough but firm. Lyra frowned, confused. You're in pain. Your body cannot handle this without help. Daniel coughed, his lips stained with blood, and yet his eyes locked on hers with a strange fire. Save it. Others need it more than me. Her heart trembled. This was not the first time he had said such words, but the way he said them made her hands hesitate. She had never seen such willpower in anyone. Not alien, not human, not soldier, not slave. The refusal was not pride, not arrogance, it was something else, something deeper. You'll die without this, Lyra whispered. Her voice breaking, Daniel smiled faintly, though the pain twisted his features. I won't die today, he said. I choose when I die. The words sent a shiver through her bones. What kind of being could speak like that? With wounds tearing him apart and blood spilling faster than she could replace it. It was madness, but it was also strength. A strength that frightened her more than the enemies outside the walls. Lyra pressed a cloth against his wound, her hands shaking as she worked. Daniel's body trembled with pain, but he did not scream. He did not thrash. He only clenched his fists and gritted his teeth. Every moment he seemed to fight not with his body but with his will. Like his mind alone was keeping his heart beating. Other nurses whispered around her, some mocking, some curious. Humans are stubborn creatures, one said. They would rather suffer than accept help. Or maybe he's trying to show off, another muttered. Their pride is dangerous, but Lyra shook her head. She knew what she saw was not foolish pride. It was sacrifice, it was control. It was the kind of defiance that did not care about comfort or even survival. This man was enduring pain so that others could have relief. And that truth unsettled her deeply. Hours passed like slow tides. Each time his body jolted from pain, Lyra expected him to give in, to beg for the injection, but every time, he shook his head, whispering, not yet, his voice a whisper of steel. She sat by his side, torn between duty and fear. She wanted to save him, to give him relief, but he would not allow it. And somehow, she realized, his strength was stronger than her own, because she could not imagine enduring what he did. At one point, his hand reached out, weak but steady, gripping her wrist. She looked down and saw his eyes clearer than before, glowing with a strange light even through exhaustion. Don't be afraid, he whispered. Pain doesn't own me. Her breath caught in her throat, the words sinking into her like a brand. Pain doesn't own me. What kind of creature said that? What kind of human believes such a thing? Her hands trembled, but she nodded slowly, unable to look away. The night dragged on, shadows crawling along the walls. Daniel slipped into fever again, whispering names, voices from his past. And yet even then his body resisted. His heart refused to stop. His lungs refused to give in. Lyra leaned closer, listening to the fragments of words. He called for his comrades, for someone named Sarah, for someone else named Michael. Each name carried weight, as if these people were anchors holding him to life. She realized then, his defiance was not for himself. It was for them. He was not enduring pain to prove his strength. He was enduring it because he refused to let go of the people waiting for him. That truth shook her to the core, because no alien she had ever treated fought like that. As dawn broke, pale light spilling into the ward, Lyra's eyes were heavy with exhaustion. She had stayed the whole night by his side, watching, listening, trembling. And when Daniel finally opened his eyes again, weak but alive, she felt her chest tighten. You're still here, he whispered faintly. Almost surprised, Lyra swallowed, her throat dry. Yes, she answered, I couldn't leave. His lips curled into that same strange half-smile. Then maybe I'm not the only stubborn one. Her face warmed. Her hands shook, but she did not look away, because in that moment, she understood something terrifying and beautiful. This human was not simply surviving. He was defying death itself, and she had never seen anything like it before. Days passed in the alien hospital, but Daniel's willpower never faded. His body was broken, yet his eyes stayed sharp, alive, refusing to surrender. Every morning, Lyra checked on him, and every morning she found herself trembling in ways she could not explain. She told herself it was duty, that she stayed because he was her patient. But deep down she knew it was something more, something unspoken. Each time he fought against pain without begging for medicine, each time he gave that faint, stubborn smile, her heart grew heavier. One evening, when the halls were quiet and most of the staff had left, Lyra sat by his bedside. She studied his face. Pale but calm, scarred yet strong. She wondered what kind of world had shaped a human like him. What kind of life had taught him to suffer with such silence? Daniel stirred, his voice weak but steady. "You're still here." Lyra blinked, startled. "Yes, I'm here." He chuckled softly, though the sound ended in a painful cough. "You don't have to be, you know." Her chest tightened. "And yet I am," she whispered, almost to herself. The silence between them was heavy, filled with things neither dared to say. She wanted to ask why he refused to care for himself, why he always thought of others, but the words caught in her throat. Instead, she asked, "Why do you whisper names in your sleep?" Daniel's eyes opened slowly, his gaze meeting hers. "Because they're the reason I'm alive," he answered simply. "I can't let go while they're waiting for me." Lyra's hands trembled, her voice barely audible. "Family?" He nodded, his lips curling into a soft smile. "And friends. People who stood with me when I had nothing." The weight of his words pressed against her chest, because she had seen many warriors fight for glory, for pride, for power, but never for love. Never for others. Her eyes lowered, but her voice carried her fear. "What if you don't make it back to them?" Daniel turned his head slightly, his eyes sharp again. "Then I'll die trying." The words shook her, not because they were reckless, but because they were true. That night, Lyra found herself lingering by his side even after her duties were done. She watched him breathe, slow and heavy but steady, and for the first time, she realized she was not trembling from fear anymore. She was trembling because she cared. The next day, rumors spread through the hospital. Whispers followed her wherever she went, voices questioning her motives. Why does the nurse spend so much time with the human? They muttered, is she protecting him? Does she think he's worth more than the rest? Lyra ignored them, but their words cut deep. She told herself it was only duty, only her role as a nurse. But she knew the truth. She was drawn to him in ways she could not explain. It was not romance, not yet. It was something purer. A bond born in silence, in defiance, in shared breaths between life and death. One evening, she caught him staring at her, his eyes heavy but warm. "What is it?" she asked softly. Daniel's lips twitched into that faint smile again. "You remind me of them." She frowned, confused. "Them? My family," he whispered. "The way you watch over me. It feels the same." Her heart skipped, her hands clenched, and for a moment she could not breathe. To be compared to the ones he fought for, it was too much. Too heavy. She looked away, but the truth had already settled between them. The bond was growing, even if neither spoke it aloud. It was there in the way she stayed long after her shift, in the way he saved his strength for her words. It was there in every shared glance, in every silence that held more weight than 1,000 voices. But shadows were stirring in the hospital. Not everyone was blind to her devotion. Not everyone approved. Whispers turned to suspicion. Suspicion turned to warning, and Lyra knew that soon. She would have to choose between rules and what her heart already decided. That night, Daniel drifted into sleep again, his hand weakly reaching for something. Without thinking, Lyra placed her own hand in his. His fingers closed around hers with surprising strength, even in his weakness, and in that moment, the unspoken bond between them was sealed. Lyra trembled, not from fear, but from the truth she could no longer deny. This human had changed something inside her, something she could never take back. And though the galaxy outside was tearing itself apart, here in this quiet room an invisible thread now tied them together. She whispered softly, almost afraid he would hear, "I'll protect you." Daniel's lips curled faintly in his sleep, as if he understood, and for the first time, Lyra felt her trembling turn into resolve, because this bond, though unspoken, was stronger than any rule, stronger than any law, and she knew, deep in her heart, that it would change everything. The hospital was quiet that night. Too quiet. The air carried a heavy silence, as if the walls themselves were holding their breath. Lyra sat by Daniel's bed again, her eyes heavy but her heart restless. She could not leave him even when her body begged for rest. Daniel's face was pale under the dim light, his breath slow but steady, his chest still wrapped in bandages that carried the stains of old blood. Lyra gently adjusted the cloth, her fingers brushing his skin, and again she wondered how someone so broken could look so alive. Her heart trembled with the same question every night. How much longer could his willpower hold him in this world? Suddenly a low rumble shook the walls, faint at first, then louder. The sound of alarms followed, sharp and shrill. Echoing through the corridors, Lyra jumped to her feet, fear surging through her chest. She knew that sound. It meant danger, it meant raiders. The lights flickered red as the emergency sirens wailed. Nurses and doctors rushed past her door. Voices filled with panic. "The enemy is here!" Someone cried. "They're coming for the wounded." Her heart froze. If raiders entered the hospital, the patient stood no chance. She turned to Daniel, who had stirred awake despite his wounds. His eyes snapped open with sudden clarity, sharper than they had been in days. "Untie me," he said, his voice hoarse but commanding. Lyra froze, her chest tightening. "What? No, you can't even stand. You'll die." Daniel's gaze locked on hers, cold and certain. "If you don't, everyone here will die." Her hands shook, the weight of his words crashing down on her. She had heard many wounded soldiers speak nonsense and fear. But Daniel was different. There was no fear in his voice, only truth. The way he said it made her knees weak. Outside the room, the sounds of chaos grew louder. Boots pounding against metal floors, shouts of soldiers trying to hold the line. The distant crack of weapons. The hospital was not built for war, it was only a place to heal. And now it was about to become a battlefield. Lyra's mind raced. She knew the rules. Patients had to stay restrained if they were unstable. She could not release him. It was against every law, every code. But when she looked into his eyes, she saw something terrifying and undeniable. She saw certainty, she saw fire. She saw the kind of will that had carried him through wounds no one should have survived. "Please," she whispered, her voice breaking. "You can't fight. You're too weak." Daniel's jaw tightened, his voice low but steady. "I don't need to be strong to fight. I just need to stand. Now untie me." Her hands trembled as she reached for the restraints, her mind screaming against it, but her heart refusing to stop. Every second she delayed, the danger outside grew closer. Every breath Daniel took was a reminder that he was not ordinary. With shaking fingers, she loosened the straps around his wrists, then his ankles. The moment he was free, Daniel sat up slowly, his body trembling with pain, sweat rolling down his forehead. He nearly collapsed, but his hands gripped the edge of the bed. Forcing himself upright, Lyra stepped closer, ready to catch him, but he waved her back. "Stay safe," he muttered. His teeth gritted. "If they reach this room, don't hesitate, hide." Her breath caught. "And you? What will you do?" His eyes glinted with that same impossible fire. What humans always do, fight back. Before she could answer, the door shook violently. Someone was trying to break in. Lyra gasped, fear freezing her in place, but Daniel was already moving. He pulled the metal IV stand from beside his bed, holding it like a weapon, his body swaying but his grip steady. The door cracked open and shadows spilled into the room. Armed raiders with cruel eyes and jagged blades. They laughed when they saw him, a broken human barely standing. But their laughter died quickly when Daniel swung the stand with all his strength, the crash echoing through the ward. Lyra stood frozen, her heart hammering. As the scene unfolded before her eyes, Daniel fought like a man possessed, each strike fueled not by strength, but by will, by sheer refusal to fall. Every move made her tremble, not from fear, but from the shocking truth this human, broken and bleeding, was more terrifying than any warrior she had ever seen. And in that dark room with raiders pouring in, Lyra realized something that made her chest tighten. The galaxy had always warned her about humans, called them reckless, dangerous, untrustworthy, but now, as she watched Daniel fight with death in his eyes and fire in his soul, she understood they had not been afraid enough. The raiders never expected resistance inside the hospital. They had come with cruel laughter, thinking the wounded were easy prey, nothing but broken bodies to be finished off. But what they found was Daniel, broken, bleeding, and yet rising like a shadow out of fire. His body shook with every step. His wounds screamed with every swing, but he did not stop. The IV stand in his hands was no soldier's weapon, just metal and weight, yet in his grip it became something deadly. When he struck the first raider, the crack echoed through the hall. The alien fell with a scream, clutching his head. Lyra pressed herself against the wall, her breath coming fast, her hands trembling as she watched. She wanted to run, she wanted to hide, but her eyes would not leave him. The human should have collapsed already, yet every time he swayed, he forced himself back upright. His eyes blazing, the raiders snarled, anger replacing their laughter. "Kill the beast," one shouted, charging forward. But Daniel did not back away. He stepped into the blow, swinging with brutal force, his stand smashing against the raider's chest. The alien collapsed, airless, shocked that a man half dead could still fight like a storm. Blood dripped from Daniel's side. His breath was ragged, but his fury only grew. He roared, not like a soldier, not like a beast, but like a man who refused to let death take what he guarded. The sound shook the raiders, even made Lyra's heart pound with something close to fear. They had told her humans were reckless, dangerous, uncontrollable, but this was not recklessness. This was something far darker and brighter at once. It was fury, pure and raw, burning so bright it cut through his broken body like it was nothing. More raiders spilled through the door, blades flashing, eyes full of hunger. Daniel staggered forward, meeting them head-on. Each swing of the IV stand sent sparks flying, each strike fueled by more than strength. It was fueled by his refusal to fall. One raider slashed his arm, another cut his shoulder. But Daniel did not flinch. He struck back harder. Lyra could not believe her eyes. This was no soldier's battle. This was survival. This was madness turned into strength, and yet, deep inside, she realized something terrifying. Daniel was winning. His fury drove him faster than the raiders expected. They came to finish a dying man, but instead they found themselves falling one by one, and with every alien that hit the floor, Daniel grew fiercer, his blood mixing with theirs, his voice a raw growl. Lyra finally moved, rushing to his side, her hands reaching for him. "Stop! You'll kill yourself!" Daniel turned his head, his eyes glowing with wildfire. "Not yet," he growled. She froze, trembling under the weight of his voice. Not from fear of him, but from the truth inside his words. Outside the room, more chaos rang out. Gunfire, screams, the clash of steel. The hospital was becoming a battlefield. But inside this small room, Lyra watched one human hold the line against impossible odds, and she realized something the galaxy had always whispered about humans but never truly believed. A human's fury could turn the tide of war. The raiders began to hesitate, their eyes flicking with unease. They had weapons, they had numbers, but Daniel's fire broke their courage. For every wound he took, he gave back more pain. For every step they pushed, he pushed back harder. At last, the final raider in the room stumbled back, clutching his arm, eyes wide with fear. Daniel took one step forward, blood dripping down his face, his body trembling but his eyes unbroken. The raider fled, his voice breaking as he shouted for reinforcements. Daniel dropped the IV stand, his chest heaving, his knees buckling. Lyra rushed forward and caught him just before he collapsed, her arms straining under his weight. "Why?" she whispered, tears filling her eyes. "Why would you do this when you can barely stand?" His lips curled into that faint, stubborn smile, blood staining his teeth. "Because someone had to," he muttered, his voice weak but steady. "And I was still breathing." Her heart ached at his words. Her hands pressed against his bleeding wounds. Trying to stop the flow, she wanted to scold him, to beg him not to risk himself again, but the truth froze her tongue because she knew, without him, everyone in that room would already be dead. As the alarms blared and the hospital shook, Lyra looked down at the broken man in her arms. Her people had always said humans were reckless, wild, and dangerous. Now she knew they were right, but not in the way they meant. They were dangerous because they refused to fall, dangerous because even at the edge of death they still stood. And in that moment, Lyra trembled again, not from fear of him, not from fear of the raiders, but from the truth she could no longer deny. This human's fury was not just saving lives, it was rewriting everything she thought she knew about strength. The battle inside the hospital slowly faded, but the damage had already been done. Walls were scorched, beds overturned, bodies lay still on the floor, and the scent of smoke clung to the air. But in one quiet room at the back, a wounded human lay unconscious in a bed soaked with blood, and beside him an alien nurse knelt with tears on her face. Lyra held Daniel's hand tightly, her fingers sticky with his blood, her heart pounding with fear and something else. Something that felt like pride, something that felt like heartbreak. He had saved them all, she knew that now. If he hadn't stood up, hadn't defied the pain, hadn't fought like fire, no one in that wing would have lived. The hospital director arrived shortly after dawn, flanked by 2 guards in dark armor. He stared at the destruction in silence, his eyes cold and sharp. When he reached Daniel's room, he stood in the doorway, arms folded, face unreadable. "This human," he said at last, "he caused damage to the facility." Lyra's head snapped up, her eyes wide with disbelief. "He saved us," she whispered. "He saved everyone here." The director's voice stayed calm but firm. "He is still a threat. Nurse Lyra, he broke protocol, took a weapon, injured others, and endangered staff. He defended us from raiders," Lyra said, standing slowly, her voice trembling but loud. "You want to punish the one person who saved us all?" The director narrowed his eyes. This is not about what he did. It is about what he is. Lyra froze. Her stomach sinking, she knew what that meant. Humans were always treated as unpredictable, violent, unstable. It didn't matter what Daniel had done. It mattered what they feared he might do next. We're transferring him to security custody, the director said coldly. He will be moved off-world once he's stable. No, Lyra whispered, shaking her head. He won't survive that. He's too weak, he needs care. Not a prison ship. The guards moved forward, preparing to restrain Daniel again, but Lyra stepped between them. Arms outstretched, blocking their path. You can't take him, she said. Her voice cracking. He fought for us. And I won't let you throw him away. The guards hesitated, glancing at the director unsure, but the director's face hardened. Then you're interfering with a security order, nurse. Stand aside. Or you'll face charges. Lyra's hands trembled, her whole body shaking now. She looked back at Daniel, unconscious, bandaged, barely clinging to life. Then she looked at the director, at the guards, at the sterile walls that had once felt safe but now felt like a trap. And in that moment she made her choice. She took a deep breath, turned toward the guards and whispered, "Then I resign." The room went silent. The director stared at her as if she had gone mad. You're throwing away your career for him? Lyra nodded, tears in her eyes, but her voice steady. Yes, I am, she turned back to Daniel. Her hands working fast, unplugging wires and machines, wrapping him in blankets. The guards didn't stop her. Maybe out of shock. Maybe out of respect. She didn't care. She had made her decision and nothing would change it now. Lyra wheeled Daniel out of the room herself, pushing his stretcher past the burned walls. Past the broken doors, other nurses watched in silence, some with disbelief, others with awe. She ignored them all. This wasn't about rules anymore. This was about something bigger. She brought him to a small supply room at the back of the hospital. One few people used. She locked the door, shut off the lights, and placed him gently on a soft cot made from folded uniforms. Then she sat beside him, holding his hand again, waiting for him to wake up. For hours she didn't speak, just watched his chest rise and fall. When his fingers finally twitched and his eyes fluttered open, she smiled through tears. You're safe, she whispered. I chose you. Daniel blinked. Weak, confused. What happened? You almost died, she said softly. And now they want to take you away. But I won't let them. He stared at her, eyes heavy, but something like hope slowly lit inside them. You stayed? He asked, voice barely audible. Lyra nodded, tears rolling down her cheeks. Yes, and I'll keep staying. Until you're strong again. He didn't speak after that. But his hand gripped hers. Not strong, but steady. And that was enough outside the hospital. Trouble was growing. Security forces would come. Rules would be broken, careers destroyed. But Lyra didn't care anymore. Her people had called humans dangerous, but they never saw what she saw. They never saw a human who fought to protect others, who chose pain over safety, who looked at death and said, not today. And now she had made her own choice, to stand beside that kind of human, no matter the cost. Daniel woke to silence. The pain was still there, but different now, quieter, duller, as if his body had finally begun to heal. His eyes opened slowly, adjusting to the dim light. The room was small, unfamiliar, but warm, and beside him sat a face he now recognized with strange comfort. Lyra, the alien nurse who had once trembled with fear, was now watching him with quiet strength in her eyes. She had not left. He remembered flashes, her voice, her hands, her defiance, her tears, but most of all, he remembered the moment she stood between him and the guards. You're safe now, she said softly, brushing his hair back. You're not in the hospital anymore. They were going to take you, but I stopped them. Daniel tried to sit up, pain rippling through his body, but she gently held him down. Not yet, she whispered. You need rest. But you're going to live. He looked around slowly, seeing old uniforms used as bedding, storage boxes stacked against the walls, emergency lights taped over. It was a storage room, hidden and silent, but it was safe. You hid me, he murmured, his voice cracked and dry. She nodded, her smile small but real. I left everything behind, my job, my rank, just to keep you alive. His heart ached. Not from wounds, but from the weight of her choice. You shouldn't have, he said, though his voice lacked conviction. I had to, she replied. No one else would, but I saw who you really are. Daniel's hand found hers, weak fingers closing around hers gently. No more words were needed for a while. Time passed slowly in the hidden room. Lyra brought food when she could, water from sealed rations, and whispered news from the outside. The hospital was under investigation. Some believed the raiders had help. Others blamed the chaos on the human, but no one had found them yet. As Daniel grew stronger, he started to speak more. He told Lyra about Earth, about his squad, about the night he got separated during the mission. He had never meant to fall into enemy territory, never meant to be taken half-dead to an alien hospital, but maybe, he said with a faint smile, maybe some accidents were meant to happen. Lyra shared too, slowly, nervously at first. She told him about her training, her dreams of becoming a healer, and how fear had ruled her life before she met him. I always followed orders, she said one night, even when they were wrong, even when they made me feel hollow. But the day I saw you fight with your body broken, something changed in me. Daniel looked at her, quiet and serious. I didn't survive because I was strong, he whispered. I survived because someone stayed. Lyra smiled through tears, her hand squeezing his. I think we survived because we chose each other, she said softly. The bond between them had grown, slow like healing, but deep like roots in the ground. They didn't call it love, not yet, but it was something strong, unspoken, undeniable, and more real than any rule. But peace couldn't last forever. One morning Lyra came in, her face pale, her voice shaking again. They're getting close, the patrols. They've scanned this wing twice already. Daniel sat up fully for the first time in days, his body still aching, but his eyes clear. Then we leave, he said. Lyra blinked, startled. Leave? But where will we go? He reached for the boots she had placed beside his cot, pulling them on slowly. Anywhere they're not, he replied. You've done enough, Lyra. I won't let them take you down with me. But Lyra stepped in front of him, her eyes glowing with tears and steel. No, she said. You don't get to leave me behind, Daniel paused. Staring at her, she was trembling again, not from fear, but from resolve. She had made her choice once, and now she was making it again. You saved my soul, she whispered. Now I'll follow you anywhere. They left that night, through tunnels used for old maintenance crews. Daniel leaned on her at first, his steps slow but stronger than before. They didn't know where they were going, only that they were free. As the stars stretched above them, endless and silent, Lyra glanced at him. You know, she said with a faint smile, I used to tremble when I saw a human. Daniel looked at her, tired but smiling. And now? She paused, taking his hand in hers as they walked into the unknown. Now I tremble when I imagine a future without one. And so they walked together, an alien nurse and a human soldier, two broken souls who had chosen each other, not just to survive but to live, in a galaxy full of war, rules, and fear. Their bond was the one thing no one expected, and it would change everything.